What happens when two seasoned business leaders get together? They talk shop, of course. Sit back and listen in as Scott DeLong and Vince Moiso share from their experience around current issues facing executives, entrepreneurs, and their leadership teams. The CEO Podcast starts now.
Hey everybody, Vince Moiso here from the CEO Podcast. I am here with Scott DeLong as usual and our very special guest, Michelle Doan. And she is from Emani, been in business since 1998 in the vegan cosmetic industry.
There were vegans in 1998?
No, 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was natural.
I didn't know that was a normal word back in 1998.
No, 2010 was
right.
Actually different. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I know. Look, this is. I love having you as a guest. So Michelle is my forum mate in Entrepreneurs Organization, Forum Ignite, and so I've known Michelle for several years since she's been in EO, and so I love the fact that you agreed to come on here. So thanks for joining us. And the topic that we want to cover today is really a follow-up from our previous conversation from a few weeks ago. And in that podcast episode, we focused really on understanding and knowing your financials, really, and paying attention. I mean, really paying attention to your financials. And we touched a little bit on what can happen if you don't. Yeah. And we talked about the worst thing that could happen, which is embezzlement. And Scott used the term trust but verify, right? And I think...
Well, trust is important, right? We're going to have to trust the people that we're working with. We're going to have to gain trust from them as well.
Absolutely.
However, that's not the end-all, be-all. Ronald Reagan, back when he was talking about breaking up the Soviet Union, is that we can trust them, but we need to verify. And I think the same thing holds true with the business owners. You got a CFO, you need to trust that CFO. You hired him for a reason. You went through all the motions. You need to check in, right? You need to verify the information and make sure that you're accountable for it as well.
Well, we're talking about some serious stuff here. So, when you talk about giving somebody check signing capability or giving them full access to your bank account or wire transfers or even credit cards, oversight of the usage of credit cards and expenses. And then at the same time, you've got a group of people that are putting out reports and they know how to use that software very well. It's an immense amount of trust that you have to put on somebody. And we talked about, again, just going back to this, you've really got to pay attention to what's going on. And when you really trust somebody, it is easy to take a step back and say, hey, they've got that part of the business, so I'm not going to pay as close attention to it. And then, bad things can happen. And I know a lot of people where that's happened. And I know, Michelle, one of the reasons we had you on as a guest is you've experienced exactly that. And I think you have a great experience share around what we're talking about. And more than that, I think you have lessons learned that you can share with our listeners. Before you get into all of that, would love for you to add a little bit of flavor about yourself and your business. So, give the listeners a little bit of your background and your business, and we can segue into the topic.
So I started Emani in 1998, and because I had cystic acne, and they had no products that could actually stop my skin from breaking out. It was absolutely frustration. And going to dermatologists, I ended up talking to chemists, chemical company, raw materials, and I'm like, this cannot be it. So I created a brand that's safe for people with acne-prone skin. So this is 1998. Natural cosmetics was in its infancy stage. And then, during 2000, 2010, natural mineral was really prevalent. Like companies like Bare Minerals was making huge headways. And when the market gets super saturated, I sat back and I thought to myself, okay, now what are we going to do? What are we going to offer that is different for our cosmetic range and for our customers. And we look at all of the cosmetic brushes that were made out of animal hairs and all the chemicals, and looking at the processes, tracing back to our suppliers. And it was a huge wake-up call for me. And I'm like, wow, I didn't realize. Once again, trust your partners, but you need to verify where all the sources and asking the right question. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, so we don't know what question to ask. So in 2010, I had the company gone completely 100% vegan, where we are sourcing, we're questioning, we're asking for documentations, and against all of my buyers, like, hey, vegan is kind of weird, no one understands, no one knows about it. And so, but we marched with it because I was passionate, and I think there was a space for that. Then you fast forward another decade, now everybody is vegan. So
time for a new pivot?
Now, time for a new pivot, exactly. So 2020, COVID, everything else changed a whole new pivot. And so I'm thinking, every brand should be clean. Every brand should be vegan. Every brand should be verifying all of their suppliers, sourcing, and every brand has to be ethical. The next step is just solving some of the issues. So Emani is about for women that went through menopause, perimenopause, that is looking for a little bit more in their makeup and skincare. Because I feel the 45, 55, 65 over is very underserved. Because I think after you hit, 50, you're like, I'm feeling so old, and then you hit 60, I'm like,
I don't know, Scott, how does that feel?
I'm just saying, I've got a wife who's over 60 and doesn't look it, right? And she's a beautiful woman, takes care of herself. 60 is not what 60 was.
No, for sure.
Those are old ladies. They're not old ladies anymore.
That's my mission, is to really empower people. It's not just about not looking old, but it's also about feeling. Feeling and putting all the tools together. So it has been quite a couple of years of change.
So are you finding young people buying your products too, though? Because you've got the environmentally friendly people that care are going to be buying the vegan quality, but it's really made for the menopause, perimenopause. That's interesting.
And also, like, people, I started the brand because I broke out a lot. So a lot of our customers are still, 25 to 34.
Okay.
But then we have a majority are over 35, over 45. And then we start looking at our consumers. I'm so glad to see a lot of women over 65 are actually really taking care of their skin and looking for the right products for their skin.
There was a news report today that I was watching, and there was this woman that you could tell she was intelligent. She came from some think tank somewhere in Washington, but she was beautiful. So my wife looked her up, 77 years old. I said, what do you think she is? Maybe 70? And still taking care of herself, like really taking care of herself. She looked her up, 77 years old. It was like, that's what we want to be.
And that's a movement we want to start, is that more women taking care of themselves.
Great. I like that. Okay, so let me take this a step further, just because I know so much of your story. You're from Vietnam.
Yes.
Your family came over from Vietnam the hard way. We don't have to totally get into that. I would say that you are far and away one of the most resilient women that I know, knowing your story and your background, and even in knowing about your business. And as everybody, I mean, someone who's been in business for 25 years, your business ebbs and flows, right? So it's not always just peachy all the time.
When people aren't wearing makeup during COVID, maybe. That might have hit something.
Whatever, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's just, business is going to ebb and flow, and you certainly have had your challenges and your good times as well. So, can you talk about that part of the experience as a business owner, as we talk and segue into the financial part of it? I think it's a good opportunity to tell your story there.
Yeah. So the last 22 years, 24 years, it's been a blink. If you had told me, in 1998 that you're going to still be doing this, 2 decades from now, I was like, oh, no freaking way, because that would be so cool. But it has been a really long journey, and I guess it's part of me not to quit, because I don't know how it is to quit. So I feel like every obstacle is an opportunity for me to grow, because I believe that there's another me on the other side of that obstacle. The last 2 years has been hard. Like Scott was saying, nobody were wearing makeup,
Right.
Mask. It was really tough. We work with a lot of salons and spas and beauty. Our biggest market was in Italy and China. Our Chinese distributor went out of business. Italy was shut down. A lot of the salons were shut down. So it's been really tough for the beauty industry.
I bet.
And so going through this whole thing, we're like, okay, now we need to kind of reach our customer base. What are we doing? And my biggest lesson was that we're looking at Facebook ads, and honestly, it's such a huge thing about Facebook ads and about all these different agencies. We talk to so many agencies that's saying, hey, we're going to do 6-row ads, 4-row ads, 8-row ads, and look at all of these case studies that we have done. Well, you can trust, and you can try to verify, but every product, every company, every nuance is really different.
Different. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the last 2 years, we sunk so much money trying to understand, trying to study. And after you're paying a huge retainer for about 6 to 9 months, you're like, okay, you know what? This is not working.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's where I think it's really important to take a look about what they are successful before doesn't mean they're going to be successful with you and the services that they provide.
Well, at what point are you pulling the plug, right? You and I have talked about that before. Is there's no perfect process that says pull the plug at this
Are
point.
we one axe away from the gold mine of gold,
Yes.
or do we need to cut our losses and move on to something else?
Great analogy.
That's the difficult decision to make.
Great analogy.
And it kept me up at night, and it sat in my stomach, and I for those 8 months that I worked with an agency, it was supposed to alleviate those issues, but
Made 'em
when
worse.
it made it worse
Because you're spending money on those issues now where you weren't before. They were just in your head. Now they're in your head and out of your wallet, both.
And the other
Oh,
thing,
my.
and one of the biggest lesson is that if you're going to fire somebody, fire fast. Because hire slow, fire fast. That's what comes to mind, is that we did hire slow, but I didn't fire them fast enough.
Makes sense.
That is. Well, okay, so let's talk about this, because I think, when we go back to financials, and I'm not talking about reading financials, I'm talking about understanding the finance of your business and watching, not just watching the numbers, but watching your cash. As Scott and I talk a lot about this, cash flow is so important to any business, and you and I have talked about that, right? So as cash flow being so important, if you can't follow your numbers, if you can't look at your financials and look at what's going on and truly understand it and follow it, that's a problem, right? Okay, you might not be the best at it. Scott and I have said that before. That's okay. You don't have to be the best at it. That's why you hire great people. And this is why I love the segue is, hire slow, find that right person that's going to pick up that strength for you and that you can trust, because I think it's the intimate of intimates when it comes to business. So if I'm going to give somebody access to my bank account and I'm going to give somebody access to our credit cards and the financials, and I'm going to give them signing authority on the checks or whatever that might be,
Even if not signing, approval authority.
approval
And you're
authority
just-
on expenses, I think, wow, that is some incredible trust, and you got to pay attention. So can you share a little bit on
how to pay attention without micromanaging.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have an excellent story, an excellent share with this is my strongest, as a CEO, I know what my strength and my weaknesses are. So my strength are developing products, building B2B relationships. So I had a director of marketing who is young, who's very savvy, who understand e-com and have some proven history with our e-com business. And my biggest mistake was not asking the right questions and understand all the nuances that goes into e-com, direct marketing, email marketing, all the different campaigns, because I place so much trust in him doing things to our benefit, which I think he probably most of the time has the right intention, but the execution fail. Because when he fail, I fail because I'm the one who's writing the checks.
Absolutely.
I'm the one who's trusting him. And so when we parted ways, it was very difficult for me to go back in, and I had to teach myself and how to read the numbers, how to read the reports, and understand all of our partners and what they're providing. So my biggest thing was that trust, but you also need to know what everyone is doing. You almost have to be a matter expert at every part of your business.
So I think expert might be a little strong. It would be great if you can, because we can't be great at everything.
Right.
But I think a few critical questions: what are we doing? Therefore, what are we spending?
Yeah.
Why are we doing it?
Yeah.
And what are the outcomes? Get your handle around that, and you've got a fighting chance, right? Without asking those questions and just trusting someone and hoping their intentions are as good as mine,
Yeah.
That's a mistake.
Yeah. So the hard thing about Facebook ads and with beauty, right? Anyone who does Facebook ad in beauty is a really, really super tough category. You have to spend a lot of money to really understand behaviors. They call it the learning. You have to spend a lot of money to see what people are clicking, what people are doing. And seriously, it's an uncomfortable amount of money just to get quote unquote these data, right?
Yeah.
And we never got enough data, and for some reason we could never scale. And I've had multiple people looking at it, and it was just kind of interesting because I was at a crossroad. Am I just bleeding money, or am I spending money by learning and investing? And that was a tough question for me to answer.
So what was it, in hindsight now, what was the answer in your particular situation?
Yeah.
Were you learning, or were you spending and just trusting?
I was spending to learn.
Spending and learn.
Yeah,
Good.
I was
Good.
spending to learn, and it was expensive, and we didn't fare well after that because we didn't see returns on that, but I got the experience of what not to do.
Good. So there's no such thing as a failure as long as we're learning by it.
Yeah.
There might be some that are more expensive than others, but if you learn something out of the process and you can put that into play going forward,
Yeah.
then maybe it was worth it.
Yeah.
Maybe it was, I can't say it was. I don't know what.
It still hurts every
what- I
time.
bet.
Every time I have to pay
Yeah.
the bill,
Yeah.
Scott. Like every time I have to pay the bill, it just hurts. And especially
Just
during.
think how smarter you are today, though.
Actually, it's true. Always have a great way of looking at things. Grass
just
is greener type of
Reframe
scenario.
things to get the
Yes.
positive out of it.
Yes, it's happening for me and not to me.
There you go.
You win or you learn. That's the reality. No, I think.
And I'm glad it's your money you're learning on and not mine. So just saying, I'm happy about that too.
Well, there's a couple lessons from this. One, I love what you said, and you said it earlier on, Michelle, is like, I heard you say I didn't ask the right questions.
Right.
And I think up front, any leader's ability to ask the right questions up front, to sniff out, that's the sniff test, right?
Yeah.
It's just to qualify whether or not it's an investment you should be making. And I think one of the questions that you also have to ask yourself, which maybe you didn't ask, I know you didn't ask it because we've had this conversation, is, am I willing to lose that money?
Yeah.
And you didn't ask yourself that question, and the answer would have been no, which would have been the one red flag to say, great, well then I don't want to make this investment if I'm not willing to lose it.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about cash and cash flow, and we talk about watching your finances and paying attention, that is one of those things where, are you willing to spend the money to just learn? Mm-hmm. And if you can ask yourself that question and say yes, then it's okay.
Then do it.
Then at the end of it, you're like, I have that money to spend, and I'm okay if I don't get a return on it. But if the answer is no, then you shouldn't be making that investment. And I think that's the harder question for people to ask, because I know a lot of business owners that just throw money at it, and then at the end they're scratching their head going, wait, I thought this was going to work. Well, because you didn't ask the right questions.
And that's not just marketing or advertising.
No,
it's research and development,
R&D.
all kinds of
Yeah.
things that that question needs to be asked.
Don't get me started on R&D, Scott.
I was thinking about you.
Yeah,
when I was talking about this.
Don't poke the bear, man.
But I think marketing right now, like especially with even Amazon and Facebook social ads and things like that, is super challenging. And if you're a brand owner, it's really tough out there. And you're on forums and people are just like, oh my gosh, why are my ads sucking? Like, why are we not turning? And there are brands that actually turn off social ads because now they're creating content. And so that's what we're looking to do, is creating content and giving customer value and understand why it's so important instead of advertising, because I think people are getting super fatigued.
Yeah, what came to mind too is budget, because I think we talk about when we had our previous podcast episode, Scott, and you and I were talking about some of the nuances of not paying attention to your financials. I love her example is great because it doesn't have to be the CFO. It doesn't have to be the person. It could be that marketing director. It could be that sales director. And if you don't give parameters, you don't give a budget, right? So you say, I want to accomplish this, and that's it, and you kind of let that sit out there, well, then that person is left to interpret what that means.
They're going to do
and then if you don't say,
yeah.
I'm giving you a budget of $100,000 to go do it, just using that as an example, that's very clear.
Yeah.
Great, I have $100,000 to accomplish X. Okay, that makes sense. Now I know what I need to go do. If you leave it wide open, and I've been in businesses where that has been the case, and then at the end of the year we're looking at the financials going, you spent what? Yeah. Holy shit. I mean, there's all of a sudden there's $500,000 on trade show and travel and entertainment, and I'm like, what? You got to be kidding me. How did this happen? Well, how did it happen? It happened because there were absolutely zero parameters on the spend. Yeah. And I think you can say, oh, I should have trusted, I shouldn't have trusted this person. Or you can kind of look in the mirror for a second sometimes and say, wow, I could have done a much better job of setting the parameters around this, and I might have gotten a better result, or at least mitigated the risk. And you said it. I love that you said it, Michelle. You said, hey, it starts with me. I'm the leader. Scott and I talk about that all the time. It's like, I'm the leader. I should be looking in a mirror and wondering,
it's on me.
Why I didn't, do better in that situation.
Yeah. I think I have a thirst for learning and a thirst for knowledge and understanding what I'm going to. I didn't mind spending the ad spend. You know what really got me was the retainer that we're paying the advertising agency. Because whether we were successful, right, or not, they still made the same amount of money.
So from their point of view, they were earning that.
Yeah.
From your point of view, they didn't do anything for it, and there's a gap.
And there's a gap. So when that's the whole thing, is that I'm sure that everyone listened to the show, they have a series of questions. Now I vet any agencies I work with very, very differently, and I take that the same vetting process for other partners, whether if they're marketing or sales or it has anything to do with the organization, is just asking better series of questions and be very clear cut on expectation. And if they don't meet it, I think I have no problem in just cutting it right there and then.
Yeah.
And save myself the headache.
Yeah.
Well, sure, you can ask the questions, and they're going to salespeople will give you the answer you want to hear sometimes too, and then having to vet that information is also important. So if I asked Vince a question about something and he gave me an answer, well, he looks like an expert, I should believe him. Maybe I shouldn't, right? How important is this to go and back and verify? So back to the trust but verify. I trust he's an expert, then I still better check up to make sure that what he's telling me is true.
Yeah.
Understand the language at least, right? That they're speaking. So
also intuitions too. I don't know about you guys. Sometimes I just feel it, whether it's good or bad, I can just feel it in my bones. And I think with the whole agency, when we went in, it just didn't feel right. Like my head was saying, you know what, you're not an expert in doing this. This company has been vetted by your team. You should just be going ahead and go with it. But it didn't feel right to me. Yeah. But I'm like, you know what, we're just going to go in and because you are not a marketing expert, so the language that we tell ourselves as well.
Here's my when you talk about intuitions, my experience with intuitions is this: my negative intuitions, my bad intuitions, are always right. My positive intuitions aren't always right, right? Because as you said earlier, I turn things around. I'm an optimist. I'll go. But so my positive intuitions are the ones that I need to check myself on as well. Those are the things I need to verify, because I lean towards optimism. I lean towards success. I lean towards wanting things to work out. And so understanding your intuitions and where you sit on that as well. But every time I've had a bad feeling and went forward, it turned out bad. Every single time.
Yeah, pay attention to the alarm bells.
Yeah,
I agree with that. That's the one that you really need to pay attention to more often than not, and I have countless examples of those as well. So, okay, how are we doing on time, Scott?
We're getting close.
Yeah, I figured we were. So I think, can we round robin this for a second? Because Michelle, what we have traditionally in our episodes is we really like to leave our listeners with nuggets as much as possible. What takeaways, right? And I think if we can round robin, starting with you, as to what advice, just strict advice to our listeners, could you offer around this concept of just really paying attention to what's going on? So whether you're talking about launching, a huge Facebook ad campaign, or if you're talking about hiring a CFO, or whatever it might be, what's the one or two things that you could tell them, this is absolutely how you would want to approach that?
I start with the end in mind first and then work backwards, because I think when you start the end in mind and set out the goals that we're trying to accomplish, and then work backwards to see how we can achieve those goals, and then make sure that we have the right tools in place, and to see if those goals are actually realistic.
Yeah, I love that. I live that. So that's a good one. Scott, what about you?
I'm just going to go back to the very simple trust but verify. And all the work I do is on trust, building trust, developing trust, rebuilding broken trust. It really surrounds that in communication. So I'm a big trust guy. I want to trust. However, blind trust makes no sense. You cannot just ignore the facts.
Right.
You got to be looking for those and challenging those. And I think I can do that without micromanaging the people that I'm trusting at the same time. And that goes about my approach, how I go about checking on those numbers and how this fits in there, and are we accomplishing our goals, and keeping very tight on the weekly and the monthly and the quarterly kind of meetings with folks. So trust but verify.
I like that. I go back to I love what Michelle said, which is just ask questions, ask the right questions. And I think what happens is, especially when we're working with our team, I've been a culprit of this where I probably go too far into empowerment, and I want to let my team do their thing, and I have a bunch of questions and I don't ask them because I feel like maybe I need to just step back on this one. And you know what? I knew I needed to ask those questions, and I didn't ask those questions.
Those questions might also spark a different question from somebody else too.
I agree.
All we're doing is creating synergy by asking questions.
I agree. I think you can't ask enough questions in, especially if we're talking about a huge expenditure, and in your case, in your experience share, it's a big expense, and so we got to ask those questions up front so we can qualify that scenario. And I think you have to have. I just think you gotta have these direct conversations and not be shy about it. I think especially with your own people, that you got to be transparent.
Especially
you got to be
skin.
direct.
Yeah.
You just can't be afraid as a business owner to ask the direct questions. It's okay. There's proper ways to communicate on any and all of that.
And it's not softball questions. They're real questions, but doing it in a humanistic way.
Totally.
So that it doesn't turn into defensiveness and that sort of posture, and that's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, people go into fight or flight mode all the time.
Absolutely.
And I'm telling you, there's a better way.
There
It
is.
doesn't have to be fight or flight.
Yeah, I think transparency is really important. So what I do is I I get into meetings and I forget my questions. So I write the top 3 questions that I don't want to forget.
Absolutely.
Because you get
Write it
into a
down.
meeting and you forget. So I write 3 questions that I want to
Or
make
we
sure.
move to the side, and then and we don't come back to the focus that you wanted to
Yeah.
have. Yeah, it
Yeah.
happens easy.
Yeah.
Well, I think the last thing I would leave this with, and I really like what both of you were saying, is trust your gut.
Yep.
I mean, when the alarm bells are going off, that means there's something going on, right? Call it your spidey sense,
Yeah.
your, I don't know, your Jedi intuition. I don't, call it whatever you
Don't
want.
justify it in your head.
Yeah, it's the alarm bells are going off, red flags.
There are more nuggets today than we've had on any other podcast. You know that?
I
We're going to do
know.
one.
I
and
know.
we're about 10.
Ah,
This is
it's
good.
good.
We're going to go on a
See
top
what you
list
get?
of 25.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm just saying. All right, Michelle, super fun having you.
How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah. Give us
Social
give
media.
give us your website or if you want people to check you out anywhere on social media.
So Emani.com, EMANI.com, and my email is just m@emani.com. Simple as that.
All right.
Super simple. As always, you can reach out to us. We love your feedback. So, when you're thinking of a topic that you'd like Scott and I to cover, or you're thinking about a guest
Or
that you'd like to
challenge
hear
anything
from.
we've having to say. It's fine too.
Yeah, it's fine
Challenge
too.
us.
You can email us at scottandvince@gmail.com. Check us out on YouTube. Please follow us if you prefer to watch. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcast, Amazon, all the regular channels. And until next time, cheers.
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 Thank you for joining us for the CEO Podcast. Please visit us at theceopodcast.net, where you can learn more about our co-hosts and listen to past episodes. If you would like to have a discussion and dive deeper into any topic, there is also an option to contact Scott or Vince to schedule some time with them. Thanks for listening.